Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 265 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is Change is Possible. Our quote of the day comes to us from Jim Wallace. Faith reminds us that change is always possible. I met today's guest about 2.5 months ago. We have quickly become friends. Joe Corcione shares his personal story about addiction and how he decided to make a change in his life. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Joe, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Chris, thank you so much, man, for having me on the show. I'm so stoked to do this, and I could not be more grateful of the opportunity, man.
Well, you hosted me on your show, so I'm honored to return the favor. And question I ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
I'm ready for it, man. Let's do it.
So as you know, Joe, the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself have either a no-quit story or perhaps a really challenging time that tested you and you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Absolutely, man. And so this is the one story where everything kind of birthed out for me, whether it's my podcast, what I'm doing in my career, what I've devoted my life to. This one story is the one that really kind of woke me up, more or less. So when I was in 5th grade, I got prescribed onto Adderall. Actually, it was more like 3rd grade, the more I think about it, and it's crazy. So in 3rd grade, I was prescribed Adderall because I had really, really bad ADHD. I was always that kid who was bouncing off the walls, being impulsive, yelling at the teacher, always in the principal's office. And my parents, who are just very, they had great intentions, and I'm not blaming them in any way, shape, or form. They prescribed me on Adderall. And that's just the way society was at that time. ADHD drugs were blowing up, and that was the thing. And so I got put on it. And through my years, being on Adderall really served me. I was getting good grades. I was not in the principal's office as much. I was much more on top of my homework and everything like that. And I was getting just great grades, and it was serving me. But as I got into college, I started to develop really deep insecurities about it. I started to realize that I was taking this in order to be focused, to be productive, to be happy, to feel good, to connect with people. And I realized that if I wasn't taking this drug, I wouldn't have any of that, and I would essentially be nothing. So I realized deep down that I was dependent on this thing, and I was addicted to it. And I knew I was really addicted to it when my doctor when I was in college said to me, you can stop taking this right now because I don't quite frankly think you need it, or you can keep taking it if it serves you. And I said, I'm going to keep taking it, and that was the moment I knew I was addicted. And ever since that point, I just developed really, really bad self-esteem. I was depressed. I was battling really, really bad anxiety, all due to this addiction and all my thoughts surrounding it, my self-worth and everything like that. And it got to a point where I was just really, really unhappy with my life. I was at a really dark point, and I was on Wall Street chasing for money. I actually got a job on Wall Street, but at the same time, I looked at my life and I said, man, what am I really doing? I found that in that pursuit of money, I wanted to feel good. But I got the money, and yeah, I felt good for a little bit, but it wasn't lasting. And I was like, damn, what do I really have to do to turn this around? And when I really did the work to look back on it, I realized a lot of my unhappiness came from my addiction. And I told myself, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get off this and really push through it. So at first, the first time I tried, I failed. Literally, I said, all right, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I'm not going to take it. I lasted maybe 4 hours, and then I went right back on it. And I was really pissed off at myself, and I was like, oh man, this is never going to happen. This is never going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And then I came across a Tony Robbins video on YouTube just randomly one day. I didn't search for it. It was just in the sidebar. I clicked it. It intrigued me. And the whole notion was around that change is possible. You can change anything in your life. And that was a really intriguing idea to me because I was told that I was impulsive. I had ADHD. I couldn't focus without Adderall. And I thought that's how I was going to be for the rest of my life because that's how I was born. But this notion that change is possible and the brain is malleable and you can learn new skills and everything like that intrigued me so much. And that's when I went on this journey of personal development. I told myself I was going to get better. I put myself in uncomfortable situations. I read voraciously and I applied the lessons in my life to the point where I was able to develop the discipline, able to develop the mindset, and able to develop the belief system that ultimately allowed me to one day take my bottle of Adderall, flush it down the toilet, and never look back again. And there were moments, where I really wanted to quit. Let me tell you, man, when the days of withdrawal were really brutal, I felt like I wanted to give up. I felt like there was an ice pick just stabbing into my brain because I was so used to it. But I knew that I wanted a fulfilling life, and I was willing to fight for that. I was willing to push for that. And I learned all the skill sets that allowed me to do it. And I never gave up. And that's what brings me here today. One plus year clean.
That's awesome, man. Congrats on beating that, and congrats on those tough times. I think it's very interesting how at a certain point in your life, and I think it happens to so many people, whether it's a book, whether it's a video, whether it's a movie, whether it's a random introduction to a person, to place, it has a really profound impact on your life down the road for many, many years, but you don't know it at the time. And the reality of what you just shared, and I appreciate your candor and your backstory, is you found that Tony Robbins video and there was no way in your mind you fast forward ahead and said, okay, wow, this one video is going to be the reason that I'm here 4 years, 5 years, 6 years down the road. And I think it's always interesting when you can look back at those times and say, you know what, it was this book or it was this thing. And for me, the first personal development book I ever read was the autobiography of Zig Ziglar. And ironically, the reason I read it was I was walking around at Borders, which are no longer around, and I saw on the side Zig Ziglar, and in my mind I said, what the heck, or who the heck is a Zig Ziglar? But I went ahead and read it, and I still can talk about that now, and this is back, I believe, in 2002 or 2003. So I appreciate you touching on that. I wanted to ask, if you wouldn't mind, Joe, just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually just recently quit my job in corporate 9 to 5. I was working for a Fortune 500 company as a financial analyst, and but it didn't really fulfill me. I was not fulfilled in life, and as being someone who's the host of the Art of Fulfillment podcast, which I'll touch on too after I kind of give the bigger story, I knew that I had to go for something that fulfilled me in life. So I'm actually working for someone who's an influencer in the personal development space. Her name is Busy Gold. I'm going to be working with her, helping her out with her podcast. She's got some great content out there. As of this listening, I'll be in Arizona, or I am in Arizona, and working with her as a production assistant and helping her out with some of her marketing and all the 9 yards with that. So that's really cool. But also, I am the host of the Art of Fulfillment podcast, which I've had you on. Great episode. For those who haven't listened, please check it out. It's a gem. But basically, the whole show is all about internal success. I noticed there's a lot of podcasts about external success and how to build a business and how to have the most money and all those things. But I was like, I really want one that really goes for what we're really searching for in life, which is fulfillment, which is how I define it, as how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. So that's what I also do as well. So that's what I'm up to nowadays, and I'm loving every second of it, and it makes me happy. And I can't encourage anyone out there who really wants to just have the most fulfilling life to do work that's meaningful to them.
I think that's really key that you mentioned that, and the way you said it is work that's fulfilling to them. And I think the reality is there's no right or wrong answer for what that is. For some people, it's a job, it's a career, it's a company, it's an industry, it's a physical location, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you said something interesting that I don't think I've heard, and I just wanted to have you repeat it. You said it's how you feel when you're by yourself.
Yep. How you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. Yes. And I can't take credit for that fully. That's actually from Tom Bilyeu, but I thought it was such a perfect description about how we want to feel in our lives, because I'm an extrovert. Some people aren't extroverts. But usually when we're around other people, we tend to feel better, right? It's just a human nature fact that we thrive when we're connecting with people, when we're with people. Like, we just feel so much better when you're around that. But it's in the moments when you're by yourself and you can really do the introspective work and look and saying, do I really feel good about my life? Do I feel good about the things that I've done and am currently doing? Or do I feel mostly just good about the person I've either become, who I am, or who I'm going to become? And asking those questions when you're by yourself, when no one's watching, no one's there to hype you up or anything like that, I think that is the most indicative definition of what fulfillment really is.
I think a lot of people could really put themselves in that situation that you just described. And what I mean by that is when you're by yourself, there are different thoughts that come into play. When you're surrounded by friends or family or loved ones, those are not typically the times when you have that self-reflection. I don't think a lot of people are watching a movie or watching a sports event or out to dinner or cocktails with friends, and then one of them just looks off to the side and goes in this 25-minute self-analysis. I think it's when those times when you are alone, and it's very key what we're going through right now with this corona pandemic, where people are having to socially distance themselves. People have to physically work from home, and a lot of people are working and or spending a lot more time by themselves. And I think that's where a lot of those thoughts and a lot of those questions of, well, am I happy? Is this what I want to do? Can I see myself working, quote unquote, by myself in this house or apartment or condo for the next 1, 2, or 3 months? So with that, I wanted to ask you an interesting question that I've been touching on for a while now with a lot of our guests is, is there anybody that you follow on social media, whether it's somebody famous or people that are famous or not, that are really having a positive impact on you, where you really enjoy their content?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 3 big influencers who have just been the absolute pillars of change in my life, whose content, books, everything they do has just totally radically shifted my life. So as I mentioned in the beginning, Tony Robbins, I mean, he's the GOAT for a reason, in my opinion. And he is someone who really opened my eyes up to what life can be and the power that we really have in ourselves. And not only that, he set the example, because he was homeless at a point, had no money, was broke, was about to get evicted from his apartment. And now look at him. He's one of the most influential figures in the world, not just in personal development, but in money and business and everything like that. So Tony Robbins for sure. Number 2, Tom Bilyeu, as I mentioned before. That guy has some of the most awesome content. And the reason why I really love him, and we talked about this on my podcast interview with you, is that there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are quote unquote born entrepreneurs, right? Like Gary Vee, he grew up hustling and, was selling, cards, baseball cards, doing all that really flashy stuff. But Tom Bilyeu, his whole message is around, he wasn't born an entrepreneur. He had to become an entrepreneur. And the reason why I love that is not only was I not a natural born entrepreneur, because I really wasn't, and I had to really develop that mindset, but he is also the embodiment of that. Who you're born as or who you were in your past does not define who you're going to be in the future, and you can become anyone you want. And I loved that. I love his message, love what he's about. Great public speaker. He's awesome. And then thirdly, David Goggins. I mean, he's a household name nowadays, but again, if someone's popular, it's usually for a good reason. Same with Goggins. Goggins taught me one of the most pillar lessons that I bring in my life, and that is suffering is the key to growth. It is the key to freedom. It is the key to learning about yourself so that you can go through any dark times that come up in your life and you can push through. And that's why I run ultra distance lengths, and I put myself through really tough physical challenges and mental challenges and do all those things because he really inspired me. So those 3 guys are the pillars to not just my transformation, but my continued growth.
Tom Bilyeu and David Goggins, those are 2 people that I look up to as well, and obviously we touched on that in your show, and I think what you just shared probably resonates with a lot of our listeners. And you and I are part of a mastermind, and last night actually, when this recording is being taken place, we had a conversation about David Goggins, and one of the things that was fascinating going around with a bunch of different people was the idea and the concept of quitting, giving up what you think you can endure, and he just epitomizes the whole idea of your mind giving up before the body, and I think both those guys, and obviously Tony Robbins has taken his entire business to different levels, and as you mentioned with the business now, he's taken a shift into that world as well. I'm curious to get your answer on this one. Is if you had to define yourself, Joe, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
Wow. Yeah, this is one where I've heard you ask your guests, and one where I had to think about. You know, one word to describe myself, it's me. It's me. And a lot of people will use like an adjective. They'll use and like something like, determined, hardworking, passionate, all those things, right? And I think those are great things to do. But I think there's no word that describes anyone better than me or myself or who I am. Because in the end of the day, I think one of the keys to fulfillment in life is authenticity, being yourself and not being afraid to express it. And the reason, again, why I choose me is because growing up, I was always afraid of people judging me. I was afraid of people not liking me. I was the people pleaser. Anytime someone wanted an opinion on me, I would tell them what they wanted to hear, not what they needed to hear. And I knew that deep down it wasn't me. But when I started to realize that being my authentic self, saying what I want to say, expressing my own ideas and beliefs without a filter on it, there's this weight that just got lifted off of my back. And you feel just more connected to your own self. You have better self-esteem. And anytime I still get that resistance that tells me, hey, this person might not like you, or if you say this or yada, 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 I tell myself, if everybody liked me, I'm not being my true self. Because the reality is this. If you're out there expressing your true self, there's going to be several people who don't like you. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That means you're standing up for what you believe in no matter what, which I love. And that's something that I admire in people and I admire myself. So my word would be me.
That's a very detailed definition, and I appreciate you touching on that the way in which you did. I think you answered it very accurately, and you really described a lot of things in there, and I appreciate you doing that. So you mentioned before being a voracious reader, and as you know, we talk about books quite often, but wanted to just ask, so you can share with our listeners, if there's anything that you're reading right now or something that you've read recently that you'd like to recommend or pass along to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm reading The School of Greatness by Lewis Howes. I wasn't really too deep into Lewis Howes' content, but the more that I dig into it, I realize how much of just a force that guy is. And I love the book so far. He's a great storyteller. And I always say, like, one of the best ways to learn things is through stories. And the book School of Greatness has a lot of great stories laid out that can really inspire you to take action in your life to become better. But I would say, like, there's 3 books that were pivotal in my life. And one of them is Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. And I know I've harped up Tony so much, so I won't go too much into that book, but that book is just incredible. And then secondly, also, It Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Again, Goggins in there. Great one, and I already hyped him up too, so I'm not going to go into that, but I'll definitely go into the third one more in detail, which is Mindset by Carol Dweck. That book was one of the most foundational books of transformation in my life because it's all about a growth mindset. And when people hear growth mindset, they think, oh, it just means like, I'm always focusing on growth and getting better and everything like that. That's not the full extent of the growth mindset. The full extent of the growth mindset is you literally believe that you can develop any trait that you want in your life if you're committed enough and you put in the effort to do so. Right? Because again, a lot of people believe that if they're in a situation, they can't do anything about it. Or if they were born a certain way, they can't get better. Let me tell you, Chris, when I was in high school, I was a skinny kid, unathletic, always picked last in any pickup game possible. I played golf as my only high school sport, and I barely made the varsity team. I was not good. But now I'm at the point where, I've ran ultra marathons. And it's not because I was born athletic. I had to work up to be that way. And the reason why I was able to do that was by having the growth mindset, telling myself that the brain's malleable, telling myself I can get better if I put in the effort, right? And not being defined by who I was born at or the skill set that I came out of the womb with. So Mindset by Carol Dweck. If you ever want to make a change in your life, that is an incredible, incredible book.
No, three fascinating books, and I appreciate you touching on the last one as you did. One of our guests within the past few weeks, Chris Wilberding, spoke about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and I think it's something that you have to be really open to understanding because from the simplistic perspective, everybody can kind of define what growth means. Oh, well, you're going to grow and go to a different point or a different level. But when you really look at it and take a deep dive into it, I think the simplicity of it is unbelievably successful, where people are really saying, you know what, I want to be better, or I want to improve, or I want to try something or do something different. And I think it's just very fascinating when you take a read of that book. and really understand how much power the mind has. And, we talked about something last night on our call that I wanted to just mention for a second. We spoke about the importance of kind of disconnecting from a little bit, and we talked about going on runs and things like that. I'm curious, as a millennial, do you ever disconnect from technology, whether it's social media, whether it's your phone, whether it's some of those things? And the reason I ask that is a lot of our guests this year in 2020 have spoken about taking these, in essence, electronic timeouts. A woman that I know does it one day a week, and she's been doing it with her husband and her kids for the last 10 years. Every Friday night till Saturday night, they disconnect completely. I've had people that do it for half an hour or an hour, but I wanted to get your perspective on if you ever disconnect from not only just social media, but also technology as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is a great point. It goes back to the idea about fulfillment, right? Because and you mentioned this earlier in the episode, and I think it relates to this very well, is that we're so distracted nowadays, right? Like we have TV, we have Netflix, we have our phones literally attached to the hip that can bring us anything. We have people all around us for some people, that is, and we never really get to look inside what is going on in our mind, right? What's really going on in there. And so for me, what I like to do, usually about once a month, depending on my schedule, though it becomes a little different. I'll go on these, like, I call them like sabbatical runs, where basically I spend an entire day in nature and I just run. No phone, if I do have a phone, it's just to take pictures, but like I'm not connected to anything, like I put it on airplane mode and I just take pictures when I need to and everything. But I'll go on these sabbatical runs, and what they do is not only am I disconnected from technology, but I become very familiar with what's going on in my head, right? And while I'm on these runs, without the distraction of technology in there, I get to really assess my life and ask those questions, such as, am I really happy with where I'm at in life right now? Am I making the right moves? Is what I'm doing like really on the path to where I want to be in life? And we tune into that, And I think a lot of people have a lot of anxiety these days because they're so distracted and they're not actually listening to the negative thoughts that are in their head on a daily basis. We all have that voice in our head. We all, for the most part, have negative thoughts that pop in, but are we consciously listening to them? No, usually not, because our head's so caught up in our phones. And so when you add the run onto it, to go back to what I do, those negative thoughts will keep coming up because your legs are hurting. Because I'll run, it would be like mile 22, and this voice is just coming up in my head, just being like, you need to stop. Like, this is hurting. Like, what are you doing? What are you, crazy? You can't do this. You can't do it. But you learn how to see those thoughts for what they are, which is just thoughts. If you think about what a thought is, it's literally just, it doesn't exist, really. It only is a figment of your mind, and also it's a product of the mind, not your mind. And I love this distinction, because once you realize that thoughts are just thoughts and they're not your thoughts, because I bet you've had the thoughts such as like, I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, or I'm going to fail. If you've had those thoughts, how can they be my thoughts, right? Because we both had them in our lives. And you become familiar with the voice in your head when you disconnect from the technology and you ultimately go inside yourself. And I think mastering your mind and mastering the thoughts that come in is a crucial, pivotal point to any sort of fulfillment, happiness, success, whatever it takes in life. So I think disconnecting from technology is a great first step to do that.
No, and I think it's incredibly important to do it, and obviously people do it in different ways, on different terms. But I think what I'm finding, and I've been unbelievably fortunate to interview some amazingly successful people from all walks of life, is they all have a little bit of a different spin on it. And the reason I love that question, and again, going back to your podcast as well, is you ask some very interesting questions, some very open-ended questions. It's not a yes or a no. But what I try to do on our show as well, similar to yours, is ask those questions that don't have a right or wrong answer. There is no one way it has to be answered. And I think for me, probably done almost 300 interviews now with guests, there are similarities. There are things that are common along the interviews and with the guests, but there's nothing that's ever been exactly the same. Obviously, books and things have been mentioned, but I just love how people have different perspectives. And I think for me, as we're going through this pandemic right now, I'm fascinated by how people are going through it. I'm fascinated by how people are striving, and those people that are, in essence, saying, I'm coming back a better fill in the blank, mother, father, sister, reader, athlete. It's so exciting in so many ways. So I'm really glad that you touched on that. I'm curious, if I had the opportunity to grant you dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Oof, anyone dead or alive, who would I pick? Yeah, this is a real tough one for me. Honestly, I think right now in my life, and it would probably change depending on the situation where I'm at in life right now, but it's interesting because I've gone through this area of spiritual exploration, right? I went from growing up as a Christian, then slightly to an atheist, and then to agnostic, and now I'm kind of opening up to a little more back on the spiritual side, a little bit in the Christian kind of area. But honestly, like, I think in my life right now, I would love to have a Jesus as someone who I would like to go with. And again, I don't identify right now as being religious, but I believe that he existed. And someone being in that position where they were basically someone who wanted to wake up the entire world on a mass scale, I wanted to know what that's like. You know, my first thought would have been Tony Robbins, but I think Jesus would be a much more interesting conversation to have in the end of the day, because I not to say like I want to be Jesus or have anything like that, but I want to be someone who helps people in that kind of way, and who is someone who's selfless, who really is just a mass influencer for good. And I see him as a prime example for that.
So as you know, we often dissect and speak about the word accountability, and we actually have had a couple of conversations on it. I wanted to get your perspective or your definition of what accountability means to you.
Yes, accountability in the grandest sense of the word, I think, is just doing what you say you're going to do. And I think it is one of the most important things in life that we need to master, right? Because here's the thing. We all have had times in our lives where we said, hey, tomorrow I'm going to get up, I'm going to work out, I'm going to stay focused, I'm going to eat right, I'm going to do all these things. It's going to be the best day ever. Tomorrow's the day. Let's go. Alarm clock wakes up the next day. You're like, wow, I'm so tired. You know what? I'm not feeling it today. Snooze. You go back to sleep. You've already lost a day. You didn't work out. You wake up and you're like, well, you know, I said I wasn't going to work out, but I said I was going to eat healthy, but, you know, I'm just not feeling great, so I'm going to grab that donut and eat that up. And then there you go. You lost another battle there. And here's the thing. You do that on a long enough timeline, what happens is you never have any self-credibility with yourself. Anytime you say you're going to do something, subconsciously your brain's going to be like, dude, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. What are you talking about? So you're never fully committed to anything in your life. And it leads to this lower part of self-esteem where you're just like, you know, I just have no confidence in myself because every time I say I'm going to do something, I don't do it. And let me tell you, Chris, I'm speaking from personal experience here. This was me to a T. So accountability, where that comes in, you say you're going to do something. You say, tomorrow I'm going to get up and work out. Alarm goes off. You get your butt out of bed and you hit that pull-up bar and you start banging out some pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups and whatever you're doing, you do it. All of a sudden, your brain says, yeah, you did it. That's awesome. Then all of a sudden, the next thing, you open up the fridge. There's the donut there. There's the banana. You reach for the banana. You're like, you said you're going to eat healthy? Damn, yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm eating healthy. And you're being accountable to yourself, let alone, you know, having someone else holding you accountable. I think at the end of the day, you're still doing what you say you're going to do. And I think that's the most important thing from self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, and everything like that, because you know that without a shadow of a doubt, you trust yourself. And trusting yourself is the key to confidence. It's the key to being authentic. It's the key to ultimately pushing through any challenge, because you know in the end of the day, you have the power within yourself to set your mind to whatever you say you're going to do, and you're going to do it no matter how bad you feel, no matter how inconvenient it is, no matter how much of the odds of failure might be, you're still going to do it. And so accountability comes down to saying you're going to do something and then pulling the trigger and doing the damn thing.
Amen. All right, once this show's over, I'm gonna rock out some pull-ups and push-ups. So you motivated me to get going. So
I'll be right there with you.
I know this is a difficult question that I ask most people, and I say it with some humor, is if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, because I think that was like 15 minutes ago for you. But all jokes aside, I'm interested in your response of that one piece of advice you would have liked to have given the 20-year-old Joe.
It's funny because you asked that question and you said, and yes, I'm 25 years old, and that was only 5 years ago for me. But 5 years ago, Chris, let me tell you, I was a way different person, dude. I was an absolute bonehead, to say it in the PG version of it. 20-year-old me, I was getting absolutely, intoxicated on the weekends, using drugs, trying to be liked by every single person, doing stupid stuff in order to get like the laughs from my friends and everything like that. Like just being very, very resistant to my parents and everything like that. I was just not a good person in my eyes. What I would tell that person is, it's okay. It's okay to feel bad, but you can do things to change that. And what I mean by that is there's two things in there that something I wish I knew at an earlier age. Number one, it's okay to not feel great. It's okay to be in a position where you're like, hey, I'm hurting, I'm struggling, I'm not doing well with my life, and I don't want to say acceptance because I don't really like that word, but acknowledging that you're feeling bad, because you're never going to fix something if you don't know that there's something wrong in the first place. And most of the times, especially in young boys, and men even in general, we don't give ourselves the opportunity to show that weakness, or perceived weakness, I should say. It's not a weakness. To show that hurting, to show that pain. And when we can really be truly open and vulnerable to it, then we can start to make massive change in our life. And the second part is, you don't have to be that way and you can change it, I think is even more important, because one of the problems that I have a lot with the mindfulness and kind of spiritual community is that they say, hey, you feel bad, it's okay to feel bad, and then it's period. They just leave it at that. I think it's okay to acknowledge that you feel bad, but I think it's unacceptable to tolerate feeling bad for the rest of your life. Do you want to feel bad for the rest of your life? I know sure as hell when I was 20 years old, I didn't want to, but I didn't think it was even possible. I thought that just the way that you felt was the way you were always going to feel. So I would have told myself, you can change it. You really can. You can get yourself out of this position. You can solve any problem that you want to solve. You can get yourself out of any issue that you're in. Whatever it takes, you can do it. And just knowing that notion of belief that change is possible, I think is one of the most empowering beliefs that anyone can have in their life. Because no matter what life throws at you, no matter what situation you're in, if you truly believe that change is possible, you're going to take the right actions that are going to get you out of there. And I wish I knew that when I was 20. I really do. And yeah, that would be the one thing I would tell myself.
And I love that you brought up the word vulnerable. I was hoping you would touch on that. And I think that's something that is incorrectly defined by a lot of people in the perspective that it's looked at as weakness or quote unquote being soft. I think from the male perspective, a lot of people use the terms man up. Well, just man up. And the reality is, I think it's incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly inspirational to be able to say not only to yourself but to others, hey, I'm messing up here, or hey, I need some help, or hey, I need some different guidance or perspective along the way. So I'm glad you touched on that. So for our listeners that want to find out more about you, whether that's on social media, but also for those that want to find out more information or get a chance to subscribe and listen to your podcast, please let them know where they can find more information about you as well as your podcast.
Absolutely. So I'm super active on Instagram. I'm at Joe Corcione. That's JoeCorcione. I put out a lot of content on my stories in there, the occasional post every once in a while. That's kind of like a long form content of what I'm thinking at the time. Very active on there. And you can listen to my podcast, The Art of Fulfillment. It's on Spotify, Apple, and Google. And I would really appreciate it if you give it a listen. And if you guys are a fan of the No Quit Living podcast, you got to check out the episode with Christopher Worth, man. It's a great one. You already know the guy, and he delivers just a ton of value like he always does on there. And so for those of you listening, that's a good one to start at. But I appreciate you asking that question, Chris. And it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to share my platform on here.
No, definitely. And as I said, I was honored and humbled to be on your show. And I think for me, that's one of the things that I've appreciated as being a podcast host myself, is whenever it's flipped and I get the opportunity to share our No Quit Living mission as well as our message. I think it's really humbling in so many ways. So I'm glad that you return the favor for me. And then last question, Joe, as you know I ask everybody, is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a quote that I actually reposted today on my Instagram story, but I thought about it and I was like, this is probably the foundation to making any transformation in your life. You know, we're always looking for the blueprint or the hack or the quick fix to everything nowadays, especially my generation. That's not to knock them. It's just the way that we were raised. We were raised with instant gratification. I get it. You change your beliefs. And once you change your beliefs, your thoughts will change as well. Once you change your thoughts, then your actions are going to change. And then when your actions change, your results change. So out of all of that, what is the lead domino that's knocking down the rest of the dominoes? It's your beliefs. And so I challenge every single person, if you're not feeling great in your life or an area of your life for whatever reason, examine your beliefs. What are your beliefs about yourself, the world, and others that are driving your decisions? Because here's the reality. Reality is only a function of how you perceive it. And how you perceive it is shaped by what you believe about those things. So if you believe down to the deep of your core that you're not enough, you're never going to take the opportunity to go out and introduce yourself to people, to take the risk, to take the leap, to do anything like that. If your belief is that, you know, other people are evil, you're going to treat other people in a much different way if you look at people, if you truly believe that people are good and natured, right? So examine your beliefs and then do whatever you can to change them. And a short way to change it, I'm not going to go on and on here. If you would like to know, please reach out to me. I would help out. But is repetition. On a daily basis, make sure you're writing out the beliefs that you want to develop. Make sure you're putting them around your apartment on sticky notes. Make sure you're, listening to podcasts that boost that belief up, because the brain loves familiarity. And when you make that belief familiar to your brain, it's going to produce the thoughts automatically that facilitate it. And again, the thoughts produce the actions, and the actions produce the results. You want to change your life, change your beliefs, and I'll leave you with that.
Amen, my man. I appreciate you sharing what you did today, and I think our listeners will definitely enjoy your podcast. So I highly recommend that they follow you on social media and also check out your podcast. And I know that you and I will connect again soon.
Absolutely, Chris, and thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say that everything you're doing here, from me and everyone listening to the show, just wanted to say thank you for spreading this message, for doing what you're doing, because you are impacting lives far more than you think. And this is a really beautiful thing. And I know you're an inspiration to me. You're an inspiration to the people listening, and you're an inspiration to everyone who's following your journey. So I just want to say thank you, Chris.
I appreciate it, my man. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to episode number 265. Joe decided it was time to make a change, and therefore, he had to take action. Joe shared how long runs have helped him, and how he looks forward to tuning out technology and just thinking during these long and challenging runs. I enjoyed Joe's parting words. If you are not feeling great, examine your beliefs and then change them and apply daily repetition. Success never happens overnight, nor is it about perfection. It's all about repetition and consistency. I challenge you to keep going. Even if you had a bad day or a rough weekend, get back up. Remain focused, stay consistent, and remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.